You think you've had a bad day? Try this. Imagine catching your boyfriend cheating, getting drunk on cheap wine, and deciding to send him a revenge photo, a selfie in red lace that leaves nothing to the imagination. Now, imagine realizing 2 minutes later that you didn't send it to your ex. You sent it to Dante Moretti, the ruthless head of the Chicago Mafia. Ilara Vance thought she would die of embarrassment, but when Dante walked into her workplace the next day, she realized embarrassment was the least of her worries. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a dangerous game of obsession and survival. What happens when a simple typo puts a target on your back? Let's find out. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grit on the sidewalk slicker. Ilara Vance watched the water streak down the window of her studio apartment on 4th Street, holding a glass of Merlot that cost $6 a bottle. It was 1:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. She should have been asleep. She had a shift at the Daily Grind, a high-volume coffee shop in the Loop, starting at 5:30 a.m. But sleep was impossible when your rage was vibrating in your chest like a trapped bird. 3 hours ago, Ilara had walked into the apartment she shared with Liam. Well, used to share, and found him with a girl named Tiffany. Tiffany, who chewed gum like a cow and wore too much bronzer. Liam hadn't even had the decency to look ashamed. He'd just shrugged and said, "Ilara, you're always working. I have needs." Needs? Ilara took a long swig of the wine. She was 24, drowning in student debt from a graphic design degree she wasn't using, and working as a barista to pay rent on this new, crappy studio she'd panic-rented an hour ago. Needs, she muttered to the empty room. She looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror, leaning against the wall. She was still wearing the outfit she'd bought to surprise Liam. It was a dark red, lacy bodysuit from La Perla, and splurge she definitely couldn't afford, bought on a credit card that was already maxed out. It hugged her curves, the high cut emphasizing her hips, the deep V-neck showing off pale skin that flushed with the alcohol. She looked good. No, she looked dangerous. "He's going to regret this," she whispered. The alcohol gave her a surge of false confidence. She wanted Liam to see what he lost. She wanted him to stare at his phone and realize he'd traded a Ferrari for a beat-up Honda. She grabbed her iPhone. Her fingers were a little clumsy as she opened the camera app. She posed, arching her back slightly, the red lace vivid against her skin, her face cut off from the nose up so it was just lips and body. Click! It was perfect. Sultry. Angry. She opened her messages. She went to create a new message. She typed in the digits of Liam's new number. He had changed it last week because of work spam, or so he said. Probably to hide Tiffany. Ilara typed the number furiously. 312. 55550098. She attached the photo. She didn't add a caption. The picture said everything. Send. She watched the blue bar slide across the top. Delivered. She tossed the phone onto the mattress and fell back onto the pillows, her heart racing. A minute passed, then 2. She expected a groveling text immediately, or maybe a "Who is this?" if he deleted her contact. Ding. She scrambled for the phone. The message wasn't from Liam. It was from the number she had just texted. But the tone made the hair on her arms stand up. "That is a very bold move, miss, but I believe you have the wrong number. Fortunately for you, I admire boldness." Ilara froze. The wine buzz evaporated instantly. She looked at the number she had typed, 312-555-0189. She had transposed the last 2 digits. 98 became 89. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her stomach. Who had she sent a nearly nude photo to? A stranger? A creep? Some teenager in a basement? She quickly typed back, I am so sorry. Wrong number. Please delete that immediately. Please. 3 dots appeared. He was typing. I don't think I will. Consider it collateral. Collateral? Ilara whispered. For what? Her phone rang. Not a text, a call. She stared at the screen. The ID just said, unknown. Her hand shook as she hovered over the decline button, but curiosity and fear won out. She answered but didn't speak. Ilara Vance, a voice said. It wasn't a question. The voice was deep, smooth, like velvet wrapped around a jagged rock. It was a voice of authority, terrifyingly calm. How do you know my name? She stammered. Your number is registered to an account linked to a lease application you filed 2 days ago. Digital footprints, Ilara. They are everywhere. Who is this? She demanded, trying to sound tougher than she felt. A man who has had a very long, very boring day, the voice said, until about 3 minutes ago. The red looks good on you. But the background, peeling wallpaper, a mattress on the floor, you look like a queen living in a pauper's grave. Look, you pervert, delete the photo or I'm calling the police, Ilara snapped. A low, dark chuckle resonated through the speaker. It was a sound that made her knees weak, though she hated herself for it. The police work for me, Ilara. Most of them, anyway. Go to sleep. You sound tired. And lock your door. This neighborhood isn't safe for a woman alone. The line went dead. Ilara pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at it in horror. She rushed to the door, checking the deadbolt and the chain. She dragged a chair under the doorknob. She sat on the bed, her breath hitching. She opened Google. She typed in the phone number, hoping for a reverse lookup. Most results were blocked or private. But one obscure result from a leaked database 3 years ago popped up. It linked the number to a holding company, Moretti Global Enterprises. Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. Every Chicago native knew the name Moretti. Dante Moretti, the Don, the king of Chicago, the man the FBI had been trying to pin down for a decade. He was rumored to be 32, ruthlessly handsome, and utterly without mercy. He ran the unions, the docks, and the high-stakes gambling rings. She had just sent a picture of herself in red lace lingerie to the Mafia boss. And he knew where she lived. The next morning, Ilara was running on caffeine and adrenaline. She had barely slept, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. She had deleted the photo from her phone, as if that would erase it from Dante Moretti's device. The morning rush at the daily grind was brutal. The shop was located near the financial district, meaning a constant stream of impatient stockbrokers and lawyers demanding extra hot almond milk lattes. Ilara, pick up the pace on the espresso machine, her manager Todd barked. Todd was a petty tyrant who enjoyed docking pay for being 2 minutes late. I'm going as fast as I can, Todd, she muttered, wiping steam off the machine. It was 8:15 a.m. The line was out the door. Suddenly, the noise level in the shop dropped. It didn't happen gradually, it was instant. The chatter of business deals and the clatter of laptops ceased. Ilara looked up from a cappuccino cup. The glass door opened, held by a man who looked like a linebacker in a suit. He wore an earpiece. He scanned the room, his eyes cold, before stepping aside. A man walked in. He was tall, easily 6'3". He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Ilara made in a year. The tailoring was impeccable, hugging broad shoulders and a lean waist. He had dark hair, styled back but slightly messy, and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. But it was his eyes that froze Ilara in place. They were storm grey, piercing, and intelligent. It was him. She didn't need to Google a picture to know. This was Dante Moretti. The air in the coffee shop grew heavy. The customers parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to speak. Even Todd, usually loud and obnoxious, turned pale and busied himself with the pastry case. Dante didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at the other customers. He walked straight to the counter, right in front of Ilara. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, but he radiated an aura of danger that made Ilara's survival instinct scream run. He smelled of expensive cologne, sandalwood, leather, and something metallic, like rain on cold steel. Ilara's hands shook. She hid them behind the counter. Can I help you?" Dante rested his hands on the counter. He wasn't wearing a wedding ring. He looked at her name tag, then up into her eyes. A small, knowing smirk played on his lips. "Ilara," he said. The voice was the same one from the phone. "We didn't get a proper introduction last night." Ilara felt the blood rush to her cheeks. She prayed the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "Sir, if you're not going to order, I'll have a black coffee," he said smoothly, "and I'm here to return something." He reached into his jacket pocket. Ilara flinched, half expecting a gun. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across the marble counter. Ilara hesitated, then picked it up. She unfolded it. It wasn't the photo. It was a printout of her bank statement. Specifically, the summary page showing her student loans, her credit card debt, and the overdue notice on her old car. "Total debt, $42,000, Dante read aloud, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Interest rates are killing you, aren't they?" "How did you get this?" Ilara hissed, crumpling the paper. "This is illegal." "I told you, I have resources." He leaned in closer. "You have spirit, Ilara. I like that. You didn't cower when I called you last night. You threatened to call the police on the head of the Chicago outfit." "I didn't know who you were," she whispered. "And now?" "Now I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He tapped the counter with a manicured finger. "I have a proposition for you." "I'm not a prostitute," she said instantly, her voice rising. "If you think one photo implies that I—" Dante's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do not insult me. I don't pay for sex. I have plenty of volunteers." He gestured to a booth in the corner. "Take your break. 5 minutes. Todd won't mind." Dante glanced at Todd. Todd, sweating profusely, nodded vigorously. "Take all the time you need, Ilara. On the house." Ilara untied her apron slowly. She felt like she was walking to the gallows. She walked around the counter and sat opposite Dante in the secluded booth. His bodyguards stood with their backs to them, blocking the view of the other customers. "What do you want?" Ilara asked, gripping her hands together in her lap. "I have a problem," Dante said, taking a sip of the coffee she hadn't even made yet. One of his men must have grabbed it. "My family, the elders, are pressuring me to marry. They want to cement an alliance with the Russo family. Their daughter, Bianca, is a viper. If I marry her, she will be a spy in my own house." "What does this have to do with me?" "I need a distraction," Dante said. "I need a fiancé, someone who is not part of this world, someone who looks innocent enough to be believable, but desperate enough to agree to the terms." He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on her neckline. "You accidentally sent me a resume, Ilara. That photo told me you're impulsive, passionate, and currently available." "You want me to fake date you?" Ilara asked, incredulous. "That's insane." "Fake engagement," he corrected. "For 6 months. You live in my penthouse. You wear my ring. You attend galas on my arm. You convince the Russos that I am hopelessly in love with a civilian, making the marriage alliance impossible. And if I say no, then you go back to your studio apartment, your crushing debt, and your cheating ex-boyfriend." Dante reached into his pocket again and pulled out a check. He slid it toward her. It was made out to Elara Vance. The amount was $100,000. "This clears your debt and gives you a fresh start," Dante said. "Plus, I'll pay for your living expenses, clothes and protection. After 6 months, you walk away. Debt-free. Safe." Elara looked at the check. It was more money than she had ever seen. It was freedom. But then she looked at Dante. He was looking at her like a predator looks at a particularly interesting gazelle. "Why me?" she asked. "You could hire a model, an actress." "Because models talk to the press," Dante said darkly. "And actresses are bad liars. You? You're real. I saw the fire in your eyes when you realized who I was. You're a survivor, Elara. I need a survivor." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I don't expect an answer now. A car will pick you up at your apartment at 7 p.m. tonight. If you're in it, the deal is on. If not, well, enjoy the interest rates." He turned and walked out. His guards followed. The bell on the door chimed cheerfully, a stark contrast to the heavy silence he left behind. Elara sat alone in the booth, the check sitting on the table like a loaded gun. She looked out the window. Across the street, standing near a bus stop, was Liam. He was arguing with Tiffany. He looked miserable. He looked small. Elara looked back at the check. At 6:55 p.m., Elara stood on the curb outside her building. She had packed a single duffel bag. It contained 2 pairs of jeans, her favorite oversized sweater, her toiletries, and the red lace bodysuit. She didn't know why she packed the bodysuit. Maybe as a reminder of the mistake that had detonated her life. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and humid. At exactly 7 p.m., a sleek black Cadillac Escalade pulled up. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't the man from the coffee shop. This one was older, with a scar running through his left eyebrow and knuckles that looked like they had been broken and reset multiple times. "Miss Vance," he grunted. He didn't ask. He stated. He took her bag before she could offer it. "I'm Enzo. Mr. Moretti is waiting." Elara climbed into the back seat. The interior smelled of new leather. It was silent, hermetically sealed against the noise of the city. As the car pulled away, Elara watched her neighborhood fade. The cracked sidewalks, the flickering streetlights, the life she was leaving behind. They drove toward the Gold Coast, the wealthiest neighborhood in Chicago. The car glided into the underground garage of a glass spire that pierced the clouds. "Top floor," Enzo said, leading her to a private elevator. There were no buttons inside, just a biometric scanner. Enzo pressed his thumb against it, and the doors slid shut. The ascent was so smooth, Elara barely felt it, but her ears popped. When the doors opened, she gasped. The penthouse was less of an apartment and more of a fortress in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Chicago. The city lights looked like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The floors were polished concrete, the furniture dark and modern. It was beautiful, but cold. It lacked the warmth of a home. "You came." Dante stood by the fireplace, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He had ditched the suit jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and inked with faint, intricate tattoos. "I didn't have much of a choice," Elara said, stepping into the room. She felt small in the vast space. "The debt collectors were calling my mum's house this afternoon." "I know," Dante said calmly. "I took the liberty of paying off your mother's mortgage as a signing bonus. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." Elara's jaw dropped. You paid off my mum's house?" "It's loose change to me, Elara, but to you it's security. That is what I offer. Security." in exchange for loyalty. He walked over to a glass table and picked up a small velvet box. "We have ground rules," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. He opened the box. Inside sat a diamond ring the size of a quail's egg, set in platinum. It glittered violently under the recessed lighting. "Rule number 1. Publicly, we are madly in love. You look at me like I am the sun and you are the earth. Rule number 2. You do not ask about my business. If I come home with blood on my shirt, you do not ask whose it is. You just call the cleaner." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. "And rule number 3. Dante took her hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It felt like a shackle. "Rule number 3, he said, locking eyes with her. You do not leave the penthouse without Enzo. You are now a target, Ilara. My enemies will see you as my weakness. If they catch you alone, they will use you to get to me. Do you understand?" Ilara looked at the ring, then at him. The reality of the situation crashed down on her. She hadn't just taken a job. She had walked into a war zone. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." Dante didn't let go of her hand. He pulled her slightly closer, intruding on her personal space. The smell of sandalwood and danger enveloped her. "Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow the styling team arrives. We have a gala to attend on Friday. The Russos will be there. That is when the performance begins." He released her hand and turned back to the window, staring out at the city he ruled. "One more thing, Ilara," he said, his back to her. "That photo you sent?" Ilara stiffened. "Yes. I still haven't deleted it." Ilara flushed crimson, but before she could speak, Dante walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the glass cage. Friday night arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. For 2 days, Ilara had been poked, prodded, and polished by a team of stylists who spoke in rapid-fire Italian. They had waxed her eyebrows, exfoliated her skin, and fitted her into a dress that cost more than her college tuition. It was an emerald green silk gown, backless, with a slit that ran up to her mid-thigh. It clung to every curve, slippery and cool against her skin. When she walked into the living room, Dante was waiting. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, a black bow tie, and a Patek Philippe watch. He was adjusting his cufflinks. He looked up, and his hands stilled. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His grey eyes swept over her, darkening with an emotion Ilara couldn't place. It wasn't just approval. It was possession. "Turn around," he commanded softly. Ilara hesitated, then turned slowly. The dress dipped low in the back, exposing her spine. "Adequate," he said, his voice rough. "Adequate." Ilara spun back around, annoyed. "I've been unable to breathe for 2 hours in this corset, and I get adequate?" Dante stepped forward, closing the distance in 2 long strides. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her neck, sending a jolt of electricity through her. "If I told you how you really look, Ilara," he murmured, his thumb brushing her pulse point, "we wouldn't make it to the gala. And we need to make an appearance." Ilara's breath hitched. It was part of the act. It had to be. But the heat coming off him felt very real. "Let's go," he said, his mask of indifference sliding back into place. "Enzo is waiting." The gala was held at the historic Palmer House Hilton. It was a charity event for inner-city youth. But as they walked in, Ilara realized the guest list was a rogues gallery of Chicago's underworld. Men with dead eyes wore $5,000 suits. Women with frozen smiles wore diamonds that could feed a small country. As Dante and Ilara entered the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted. The music didn't stop, but the conversations did. Hundreds of eyes turned to them. Dante placed his hand on the small of her back. The heat of his palm burned through the silk. "Head up," he whispered in her ear. "Smile. You own this room because you're with me." Elara forced a smile. Flashbulbs popped as the event photographers swarmed them. "Mr. Moretti, who is the lady? Is it true about the merger?" Dante ignored them all, guiding Elara through the crowd like a shark parting a school of fish. "Dante!" a voice boomed. A man stepped in front of them. He was short, stout, with a face like a bulldog and a cigar in his hand. Beside him stood a woman who looked like a poisonous flower. She had jet-black hair, blood-red lips, and a silver dress that looked like chainmail. "Sal," Dante nodded, his voice cool. "And Bianca." This was the Russo family, the people Dante was trying to avoid. Bianca Russo's eyes locked onto Elara. She scanned her from head to toe, her expression curling into a sneer. "So," Bianca said, her voice high and nasal, "this is the mystery woman. I didn't realize you were into charity cases, Dante. Who is she? Some waitress you picked up?" Elara felt Dante tense beside her. His hand tightened on her waist. But before he could speak, Elara stepped forward. The adrenaline of the moment, the weeks of anger at Liam, and the absurdity of her situation coalesced into a sharp, cold confidence. "Actually," Elara said, her voice steady and sweet as poison, "I'm a graphic designer. But I suppose when you've never worked a day in your life, all jobs look the same, don't they, Bianca?" The circle of people around them went silent. Someone gasped. "You didn't talk to Bianca Russo like that." Bianca's eyes went wide with rage. Sal Russo, however, let out a barking laugh. "She's got teeth, Dante," Sal grinned, chomping on his cigar. "I like her. Much better than the models you usually drag around." Dante looked down at Elara. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by a gleam of intense pride. He pulled her closer. "She is unique," Dante said. "Excuse us, Sal. We need drinks." He steered her away toward the bar. Once they were out of earshot, he leaned down. "You are dangerous," he whispered. "Insulting Bianca Russo is a good way to get a drink thrown in your face, or worse." "I thought you liked boldness," Elara countered, her heart pounding. "I do," Dante admitted. His eyes dropped to her lips. "I really do." Just then, a waiter bumped into Elara. "So sorry, miss," the waiter mumbled, pressing a napkin into her hand before disappearing quickly into the crowd. Elara looked down. It wasn't a napkin. It was a note scrawled on heavy cardstock. She unfolded it. The message was written in red ink. "He can't protect you forever. The red lace will look better when it's stained with your blood." Elara stopped walking. The blood drained from her face. "Elara," Dante asked, sensing her fear instantly. "What is it?" She handed him the note. Dante read it. His face didn't change, but the air around him seemed to drop 20 degrees. His eyes scanned the room, instantly shifting from socialite to assassin. "Enzo," he spoke into his cufflink microphone. "Secure the exits. We have a breach." He grabbed Elara's hand, his grip bruising. "We are leaving. Now." "Who sent that?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "Was it Bianca?" "No," Dante said, dragging her toward the kitchen exit, away from the paparazzi. "Bianca is petty. This is a death threat from someone who knows about the photo. Someone who has been watching you since that night." He pushed through the swing doors into the kitchen, startling the chefs. He didn't stop until they were in the back alley, where the SUV was already screeching to a halt. Dante threw her into the back seat and climbed in after her. "Go," he ordered Enzo. "Safe house, not the penthouse." As the car sped away, Dante turned to Elara. She was shaking. He reached out, not to comfort her, but to grip her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me," he commanded, his voice fierce. "You are not just a fake fiancé anymore. Someone has breached my digital security. They saw the text you sent. They know who you are." "What does that mean?" Ilara cried. "It means," Dante said, pulling a gun from a hidden holster beneath his jacket and checking the safety, "that you are now the most hunted woman in Chicago, and the only thing standing between you and a grave is me." Ilara looked at the gun, then at Dante's hard, unyielding face. The game was over. The nightmare had begun. The drive took 2 hours. They left the city limits of Chicago, heading north into the deep woods near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The silence in the SUV was deafening. Dante sat staring out the window, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. Ilara sat hugging herself, the chill of the adrenaline crash settling into her bones. The safe house wasn't a cabin, it was a bunker disguised as a luxury lodge. Nestled deep in the timberline, it was made of reinforced steel and dark wood. When the car stopped, Dante didn't wait for Enzo to open the door. He got out and pulled Ilara with him. "Inside," he ordered. "Enzo, sweep the perimeter. Sensors on full range. If a squirrel gets too close, I want to know about it." Inside, the house was freezing. Dante marched to a control panel on the wall, punching in a code. The lights flickered on, and the hum of the heating system kicked in. Shutters made of bulletproof steel rolled down over the windows with a heavy mechanical thud, sealing them in. "You can relax now," Dante said, turning to her. He stripped off his tuxedo jacket and threw it onto a leather armchair. He looked exhausted. The invulnerable Don looked human for the first time. "Relax?" Ilara's voice rose an octave. "Someone just threatened to kill me in the middle of a ballroom, Dante. Someone who knows about the photo. Someone who knows I'm a fraud." "They don't know you're a fraud," Dante corrected, walking to the wet bar. He poured 2 stiff scotches. "They think you're my weakness. That's why they threatened you, to get a reaction out of me." "Well, it worked!" Ilara shouted. "We ran away." Dante slammed his glass down on the counter. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He crossed the room in 3 strides, backing Ilara up until her legs hit the edge of the velvet sofa. He loomed over her, his eyes blazing. "We did not run," he growled. "I performed a tactical retreat. There is a difference. If I had stayed, I would have turned that ballroom into a slaughterhouse to find the person who put that note in your hand. Is that what you wanted? A massacre on the 6 o'clock news?" Ilara stared up at him, her chest heaving. I don't want to die for a paycheck." Dante's expression softened, just a fraction. He reached out, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. His hand was rough, calloused from years of violence, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "I told you I would protect you," he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "I meant it. No one touches what is mine." The word hung in the air. "Mine." Ilara felt her breath hitch. "I'm not yours, Dante. This is a contract." "Is it?" Dante challenged. He stepped closer, his body pressing against hers. She could feel the heat radiating off him, smell the scotch and sandalwood. "You think this is just business? You think I looked at you tonight and saw an employee?" "I don't know what you saw," Ilara whispered. "I saw the only real thing in my entire life," Dante murmured. He lowered his head, his lips hovering inches from hers. "That photo you sent. It didn't just catch my attention because of the lace, Ilara. It caught my attention because for 10 years I have felt nothing. I am a machine built for war." And then, a wrong number. A spark. "You woke me up." Ilara's resolve crumbled. The fear of the assassin, the absurdity of the situation. It all faded under the intensity of his gaze. "Dante," she breathed. He didn't wait. He crashed his lips onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was possessive, desperate, and hungry. It tasted of scotch and danger. Ilara kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her hands in his hair. The friction between them sparked a fire that had been smouldering since he walked into the coffee shop. He lifted her easily, sitting her on the edge of the high-backed sofa, stepping between her legs. His hands roamed over the silk of her dress, finding the zipper at her hip. "The contract," Ilara gasped, breaking the kiss for a second. "Rule number 1. Fake love." "To hell with the rules," Dante growled against her neck, sending shivers down her spine. "There is nothing fake about this." That night, the storm raged outside the reinforced shutters, but inside, the world narrowed down to 2 people, desperate to feel alive in the face of death. Ilara woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she forgot where she was. She stretched, her body aching in a pleasant way. She was in a massive, king-sized bed, covered in a fur throw. The events of the night before came rushing back. The gala, the threat, the drive, and Dante. She turned over, but the other side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. She found a heavy silk robe at the foot of the bed and put it on, walking out into the main living area. The atmosphere had changed. The warmth from last night was gone, replaced by a suffocating tension. Dante was standing by the fireplace, fully dressed in black tactical gear. He was cleaning a semi-automatic pistol with methodical, angry movements. Enzo stood by the door, holding a tablet, looking grim. "Good morning," Ilara said, hesitating. Dante didn't look up. He slid the barrel back onto the frame of the gun with a sharp clack. "Is it?" he asked. His voice was ice-cold, devoid of the passion from a few hours ago. Ilara felt a knot form in her stomach. "Dante, what's wrong?" He finally looked at her. His eyes were dead. The grey storms were still. "Enzo picked up a signal," Dante said calmly. "About 20 minutes ago. An encrypted burst transmission. It originated from inside this house. It broadcast our GPS coordinates to a server in Russia." Ilara blinked, confused. "Russia? I don't understand." "The server belongs to the Volkov Syndicate," Dante continued, walking slowly toward her. "Allies of the Russos, enemies of mine." "Okay. So someone hacked the house?" Ilara asked, stepping back. "The house is a Faraday cage," Dante said. "Nothing gets in or out unless it's hardwired, except for one device that was brought in yesterday, which bypassed my firewall because it had a cloned SIM card embedded in the battery." He reached into his pocket and pulled out Ilara's phone. He threw it at her feet. It skidded across the floor, stopping near her bare toes. "You," Ilara whispered. "You think I did this?" "The transmission came from your phone, Ilara," Dante said, his voice rising. "Did you think I wouldn't check? Did you think you could sleep in my bed, make me trust you, and then sell me out to the Volkovs?" "I didn't!" Ilara screamed, tears springing to her eyes. "I don't even know who the Volkovs are. I'm a barista, Dante. I sent a wrong number text. That's it." "A wrong number," Dante laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. "The perfect cover. Innocent, clumsy, and I fell for it. I actually fell for it." He turned his back on her. "Enzo, tie her up." "Dante, no," Ilara pleaded, as Enzo stepped forward, looking apologetic but obedient. "Please." "Someone must have tampered with my phone at the gala. The waiter, he bumped into me. He gave me the note." "Enough lies!" Dante roared, spinning around. He looked heartbroken, which made his rage even more terrifying. "We have company arriving in less than 10 minutes. A hit squad. Because of you." Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the house. The front door, reinforced steel and all, buckled inward. Dust and debris filled the air. The sound of automatic gunfire erupted from the tree line. "They're here early," Enzo shouted, drawing his weapon. "Boss, we're compromised. 12 hostiles at the perimeter." Dante didn't look at Ilara. He kicked the sofa over to create a barricade. "Get down," he ordered her, without looking. "Stay low if you want to live to see a prison cell." Ilara dove behind the heavy oak bar in the kitchen as bullets shattered the windows, punching through the expensive glass. She covered her head, sobbing. She was going to die here. And Dante hated her. Through the chaos, she heard Dante and Enzo returning fire. The noise was deafening. "Right flank!" Dante yelled. Then she heard a sound that made her blood freeze, a grunt of pain, a heavy thud. "Dante!" Enzo yelled. "Boss is down!" Ilara didn't think. She didn't care about the betrayal or the lies or the danger. She scrambled on her hands and knees, crawling out from behind the bar. She saw Dante on the floor near the fireplace. Blood was blooming on his shoulder, staining his black tactical shirt. He was still firing his weapon with one hand, his face pale and gritted in agony. A man in a ski mask vaulted through the broken window, raising a rifle aimed straight at Dante's exposed head. Dante's gun was empty. The slide was locked back. He couldn't reload in time. Ilara saw the heavy fireplace poker lying on the floor next to her. She grabbed it. She screamed, a primal sound of rage, and lunged. She swung the iron poker with all her strength, smashing it into the masked man's knees. He howled, his aim flying wide. The bullet shattered a vase instead of Dante's skull. The man fell, and before he could recover, Dante had drawn a backup knife from his boot and ended the threat with a brutal, efficient motion. Silence fell for a second. Dante looked up. He was bleeding, panting, his eyes wide. He looked at the dead hitman, then at Ilara. She was standing there, shaking, holding a bloody fireplace poker, breathing hard. She had just saved his life. "Ilara," he wheezed, clutching his shoulder. "I didn't sell you out," she sobbed, dropping the poker. "I swear to God, Dante, I didn't." Before he could answer, Enzo shouted from the window. "We have an opening. The SUV is still intact. We have to move, now." Dante struggled to his feet. He looked at Ilara. The distrust was still there, warring with gratitude. "Move," he groaned. He grabbed her arm, not gently, but not aggressively either. He pulled her toward the back exit. "We sort this out later. If we survive." They ran into the cold morning air, the snow stained with blood, leaving the burning safe house behind them. But as they piled into the car, Ilara knew one thing. The man who held her hand last night was gone. In his place was the Don, and she was now his prisoner. The air in the executive boardroom of Thorn Global was so thick with unspoken tension it felt combustible. Outside the panoramic windows, the afternoon sun cast long, judging shadows across the mahogany table where the fate of the city's most powerful man was about to be decided. Sarah stood at the center of the room, not behind a podium or a defense table, but simply present. She wore a simple, dark suit that gave her no power, yet she radiated a quiet, unshakable authority that silenced every man in the room. Mr. Thorne, usually a figure of titanic composure, was sweating. His tailored suit looked suddenly too tight, his usual veneer of polished aggression cracking under the glare of the recessed ceiling lights. He sat at the head of the table, flanked by the 7 members of the board, a collection of financiers and industrialists who were now desperately trying to maintain neutral expressions, their loyalties shifting faster than the stock market. The previous 6 parts had laid the meticulous groundwork: the digital trail of embezzlement, the leveraged coercion of contractors, the calculated suppression of dissent, and the hidden accounts that proved Thorne's entire empire was a grand, criminal illusion. Now, all those threads converged. "Mr. Thorne," Sarah began, her voice low but carrying an unusual resonance, "for the benefit of the board, I will summarize the 3 key points of evidence presented in the preceding 6 hours." She nodded to a woman near the projection screen, a former colleague of Thorne's who had secretly assisted Sarah. On the screen flashed a complex, interlocking flowchart. 1. The funds diverted from the city revitalization project were not, as claimed, placed into an aggressive reserve account. They were systematically routed through a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, codenamed Chimera 7, and then dispersed into personal, untraceable assets, including the ownership of 3 properties in Zurich and the private yacht currently registered under your estranged sister's name. Thorne scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Hearsay and conjecture, Miss Williams. Any good lawyer can dismantle a paper trail constructed by disgruntled employees." "That brings me to point 2, Sarah continued, ignoring the interruption. Her eyes did not leave his. "The paper trail isn't the only evidence. As the board is aware, your former chief financial officer, Mr. Harris, has been under a cloud of suspicion for months. Mr. Harris has provided a full, notarized confession, detailing how you personally instructed him to generate 2 sets of books. He has also confirmed the authenticity of the voice recordings taken during your weekly private meetings where you explicitly discuss the logistics of the fraud." A gasp rippled through the room. The board members exchanged glances. Thorne had publicly painted Harris as the sole culprit, a narrative that had just been incinerated. "And finally, point 3, Sarah pressed on, allowing the silence to stretch, intensifying the board's discomfort. "The true nature of Project Nightfall." This time, Thorne's composure shattered. He slammed his hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. "That is confidential business information. You have no authorization to speak of Nightfall." "I have every authorization, Mr. Thorne," Sarah countered, stepping toward the table. "Because Project Nightfall wasn't a confidential acquisition of rival energy grids. It was the mechanism you designed to bankrupt and silence our main competitor, Atlas Energy. The data provided by Atlas's chief engineer, Mr. Chen, who was coerced by your team to falsify compliance reports, shows that your intended hostile takeover would have plunged half the state into energy instability, allowing you to buy the failing infrastructure for pennies on the dollar." She looked at the board members, her gaze compelling them to acknowledge the moral rot beneath the glossy figures. "The fraud wasn't just about money, gentlemen. It was about weaponizing essential infrastructure for personal profit, risking the welfare of millions." Thorne stood up, towering over the table, his movements fueled by pure, desperate adrenaline. "This is a farce!" he roared. "She's a secretary, a glorified administrative assistant who managed to steal some files and spin a fantasy." He pointed a shaking finger at the board. "Do you truly believe this weakling? Or do you believe the man who built this corporation from nothing? The man who made you all rich?" His plea was raw, pathetic. He was appealing to their greed, their shared history of comfortable corruption. A younger board member, Mr. Davies, cleared his throat, pushing his glasses up his nose. "With respect, sir, the evidence is compelling. The confessions, the account ledgers verified by 3 separate external auditing firms. It's beyond a reasonable doubt." "Beyond a reasonable doubt?" Thorne laughed, a high, manic sound. "I own reasonable doubt. I bought it, sold it, and traded it on the market. You wouldn't exist without me, Davies. None of you would." He rounded the table, stopping directly in front of Sarah. His eyes were cold, venomous, stripped of all pretense. "You," he hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper only she could hear. "You think you're a hero? You're nothing. You've wasted your life to bring down one man, and what will you have? A moment of righteous glory, followed by a lifetime of looking over your shoulder. You have no idea what you've unleashed." Sarah didn't flinch. She had anticipated this moment for months, visualizing it 1,000 times during sleepless nights. "I have unleashed the truth, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "And you are right. It cost me everything. My job, my security, my belief that power was inherently good. But in exchange, I gained something you will never understand, the power to look at myself in the mirror and know I stood for something." It was a philosophical blow, hitting him where his arrogance was most sensitive. Before Thorne could respond, the boardroom doors opened. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by the chief legal counsel, Ms. Hayes, who looked both relieved and deeply weary. Ms. Hayes addressed Thorne directly, her voice devoid of emotion. "Mr. Thorne, based on the documented breaches of fiduciary duty, the confirmed evidence of wire fraud, and the sealed warrant issued an hour ago, the board has voted unanimously to remove you as CEO, effective immediately, pending full legal proceedings. The authorities are here to escort you." Thorne stood immobile for a beat, processing the totality of his defeat. He looked at the board, at the officers, and finally, back at Sarah. The moment stretched, a final curtain call. Then he simply nodded, his shoulders slumping. He held out his hands. The sharp, mechanical click of the handcuffs was the only sound in the vast, silent room. As the police led Thorne away, the air shifted, the oppressive pressure releasing. The board members immediately began a frantic, low-voiced discussion about damage control, their eyes studiously avoiding Sarah. They were eager to erase the past, to legitimize the future. Ms. Hayes approached Sarah. "You did it, Williams," she murmured, a flicker of genuine respect in her eyes. "You brought down a giant. I never thought I'd see the day." "The evidence did the work, Ms. Hayes," Sarah said, collecting her files, which now felt lighter than air. "No," Hayes insisted softly. "It takes courage to hold on to those files for a year, knowing the risk. What will you do now?" "I'm going home," Sarah said. She walked out of the boardroom. She passed the executive suites, the symbols of Thorne's obscene wealth and power, the priceless art, the sculpted statues, the vast, echoing hallways. None of it felt intimidating anymore. It just felt hollow. She reached her old desk, tucked away in an unremarkable corner of the administrative pool. Her nameplate was still there. She picked up a small framed photo of her and her younger sister, the real reason she had risked everything. She turned to her closest friend, Emily, who had worked beside her for years and who was now staring at her with wide, reverent eyes. "Is it really over, Sarah?" Emily whispered. "It is," Sarah confirmed, offering a small, exhausted smile. "You won't have to keep secrets anymore, Em. You won't have to be afraid. But what about you? They'll try to shut you out, blacklist you." "Let them," Sarah said, dropping the heavy briefcase containing the files into a waste bin. "They can keep their corrupted world. I don't want it." She walked past the reception desk, where the new temp looked up, recognizing her face from the morning news reports that had already started filtering out. Sarah gave her a quick, kind nod. She didn't feel triumphal. She felt profoundly tired, yet profoundly free. As she stepped out of the gilded tower and onto the street, the city engulfed her. The noise, the people, the honking taxis. It was chaos, but it was real. She stopped at the corner and looked up at the skyscraper. The sun glinted off the Thorne Global sign, a name that, by morning, would likely be covered in scaffolding, preparing for a corporate rebrand. The symbol of the man who had terrified her for so long was nothing but glass and steel. Sarah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a bus pass. She had left her resignation on her desk. She hadn't arranged another job. She had no grand plan for the future, only a profound sense of closure. She walked toward the bus stop, not as an executive, not as a witness, but as herself. She felt the heavy, burdensome weight of injustice lift from her shoulders, replaced by the simple, beautiful weight of being an ordinary woman on an ordinary street. The future was uncertain, messy, and entirely hers. And that, she realized, was the greatest reward of all. She had faced the darkness, and she had chosen the light. The battle was won, but the real victory was finding peace. She pulled out her phone, called her sister, and began to talk, not about what was lost, but about what they would build next. And that, my friends, is how the mighty finally fell. Sarah didn't just walk away with a settlement. She walked away with her integrity intact, leaving Mr. Thorne to face the music in a cold cell. It's a perfect reminder that no amount of money or power can buy you out of the truth when someone brave enough finally decides to speak up. I really hope you enjoyed this journey. Watching Sarah go from a silenced assistant to the woman who took down an empire was incredibly satisfying. If you were cheering for her right until that final elevator ride, please do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories just like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. We have an even crazier story coming up next week involving a rancher and a secret that could change history. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Thorne's punishment was enough? Or did he deserve even worse for what he did to the city? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.